We often think that conflict starts out there, in the world. But what if it actually starts right here, inside our own minds? Well, there's this incredible ancient teaching that gives us the exact blueprint for how we build our own turmoil, and it all kicks off with a story about a guy who tried to pick a fight with the Buddha.
All right, so picture this. The Buddha is just meditating in a forest near a couple of vastu. It's peaceful. Then this man, Dandapani, walks up and he's literally holding a staff. Now this guy has a bit of a reputation for being argumentative, and he is not there for a friendly chat. He's looking for a debate.
He doesn't even bother with a hello. He just jabs his staff into the ground and fires off this question. It's super aggressive, right? He's basically saying, so what's your deal? What's your philosophy? Put it in a neat little box for me so I can tear it to shreds. He's setting a trap.
But the Buddha, he doesn't take the bait. He doesn't give him a label or a doctrine to argue with. He doesn't say, I teach non-attachment or anything like that. Instead, he describes a state of mind, something so far outside Dandapani's combative worldview that it just completely jams the gears of his argument engine.
He says something like, friend, my teaching is one where you don't argue with anyone, where your mind is so free that perceptions don't get stuck and become obsessions, a mind that has no doubt, no craving to exist or to not exist. I mean, just imagine being Dandapani and hearing that. How do you even begin to argue with it? It's not a theory. It's a description of a totally liberated consciousness.
And his reaction is just priceless. The story says he shook his head, clicked his tongue, and walked off with his forehead all bunched up in wrinkles. He was so completely confused and annoyed that he couldn't even come up with a comeback. He came looking for a fight and got a riddle instead. So what on earth was so profound about that answer?
Well, the plot thickens, because later that same day, the Buddha tells his monks about this weird encounter. And guess what? They're just as confused as Dandapani was.
So one of the monks speaks up. He's basically saying, okay, we get the goal. A life without conflict sounds great, but what's the actual method? How does that work in practice? If the Buddha's own inner circle needs a better explanation, we're about to get into something really deep.
So the Buddha answers again, but he just makes the riddle even deeper. He says it all boils down to a specific source, a source inside us from which all these complicated thoughts and judgments come flooding out. And he says if you can just stop engaging with that source, don't get excited by it, don't welcome it in, don't cling to it, then all conflict just stops. And after dropping that little bombshell, he just gets up and leaves.
Okay, so now the monks are just left there, scratching their heads. They've just been handed this massive puzzle. They know the secret to ending all conflict has to do with some mysterious source in the mind, but their teacher has just walked off. So what is this source? They figure there's one person who might have a shot at cracking this, the monk Mahākāccana. He was famous for his incredible wisdom and his knack for explaining the Buddha's short, dense teachings. If anyone can decode this, it's him.
But at first, Mahākāccana is a little hesitant. He's very humble and tells them, look, you guys are like someone who needs the strongest wood from the core of a tree, but starts hacking away at the leaves and twigs. What he's saying is, why are you asking me? You were just with the Buddha himself, the root of all this wisdom.
But they keep at it, telling him how much the Buddha himself praised his insight. And so, out of compassion, he agrees to give it a shot. And this is the moment we've been waiting for. What is this source of all our mental drama? It turns out the answer is a single, powerful Pali word. And here it is. This is the big reveal. Mahākāccana is about to pull back the curtain on the automatic, unconscious process that runs our lives, the mental factory that manufactures conflict out of absolutely nothing.
He introduces them to this concept called Papañca. What's so amazing about this idea is that it's basically describing the runaway storyteller in our heads. See, Papañca is the mind's habit of taking one simple, neutral experience and just spinning it out of control, complicating it, building this huge, emotionally charged story around it. It's our inner what-if machine, our inner critic, our inner worrier, all rolled into one.
And this is how it works. Mahākāccana lays out the whole chain reaction step by step. It all starts with simple contact. Your eye sees something. That contact creates a feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or just neutral. Then your mind slaps a label on it, a perception, tree. After that, a simple thought arises. That's a tall tree. So far, so good. This is all pretty normal. But then, Papañca kicks in. The mind starts to proliferate, to complicate things. That tree is way nicer than my neighbor's sad little bush.
Why doesn't my yard look that good? I bet they think I'm a slob. I should do something. And just like that, a simple sight has turned into a whole story about jealousy, insecurity, and social competition. That is the source.
And here's the key to the solution. Mahākāccana explains that this entire chain reaction absolutely depends on that first moment of contact. Think about it. If there's no contact through your senses, no feeling can arise. And without a feeling, there's no perception. Without perception, there's no initial thought. And this is the critical part. Without that first thought, the whole engine of Papañca has no fuel to run on. The entire conflict factory just never starts up. The switch stays in the off position.
So, now that they have this incredibly clear explanation, the monks are just blown away. They thank Mahākāccana profusely and head straight back to the Buddha. They have to run it by him to make sure their friend really did crack the code.
And the Buddha gives it his ultimate seal of approval. He says, yes, Mahākāccana is truly wise, and his explanation was absolutely perfect. He even says, if you had asked me, I would have explained it in the very same way. The great riddle has finally been solved. Now, at this moment, the Buddha's personal attendant, Ananda, has been listening to this whole thing unfold, and he is just completely filled with joy. He's so moved by how clear and beautiful the teaching is that he comes up with the perfect metaphor for what it feels like to finally get it.
Ananda says it's like a person who is starving wandering through the wilderness, who suddenly stumbles upon a ball of pure honey. Doesn't matter which part they taste, the top, the side, the bottom, every single bite is just sweet, delicious, and life-saving. And that's what this teaching is like. No matter how you look at it, it just brings satisfaction and peace.
The Buddha loves this analogy so much that he basically makes it official. He tells Ananda, from now on, you should remember this teaching as the Honeyball Discourse. And that's the name it's had for more than 2,000 years.
And that's really the whole point of the Honeyball Discourse, to give us this one sweet piece of wisdom. The source of our conflict isn't some enemy out there, it's an internal process. It's Papañca. So the story leaves us with a question that's also a practice. Can you catch your own mind in the act? Can you notice that exact moment when a simple tree becomes a complicated problem? Because just seeing that process is the first step to letting it all go.